Good morning, church.
Good morning.
As many of you know, I'm Sister Aisha White. My two children are Tyrone Lewis. Ty, raise your hand. And Jalaisha. Jalaisha, raise your hand. Those are my babies. So my story today is going to be a little different. I'm going to walk you all through the journey that it took me to get my babies. My experience as a mother began quite adventurous, to say the least. It was a little different than the usual 9 months of pregnancy, ending with a strenuous birth. The first time I laid eyes on my baby girl, she was actually 2 months old. I'll never forget the feeling and the instant love that I had for Jalaisha. The first time I laid eyes on my son, he was 14 months, crawling down the steps backwards with an extremely runny nose. But I had no idea the journey that God had in store for the three of us. Although the youngest, Jalaisha was the one that I encountered first. She was at my mom's shop with her dad, who is my first cousin, getting his hair done. As soon as I looked into her blue eyes, I fell in love. Initially, I thought it was because of the eyes that I fell in love with her, but now that we've gone through what we've gone through, I realize that God put that love into me for her for a different reason that we did not know about at the time. When I first met her, I did not ask her father if she could go with me because he and I were not close. Everybody knows that I kept all the kids in the family. At any given time, I would have 10 kids up in my house every weekend. People would always say, "Oh, Aisha, when are you going to have your own child?" And I'm like, I'm 22, 23 years old. Give me time. So anyway, he ended up calling me, asking me if I can keep her. And that's how this all began. He brought her to me quite often. I would keep her for maybe 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Now keep in mind, she's only 2 or 3 months. And he would always complain that her mom wasn't taking care of her. I didn't know her mom, so I couldn't put that on her, but I do know that I had a newborn baby at my house quite often, so there was a disconnect somewhere. So one day he finally asked me, he got fed up. He said, "Can you please take custody of her?" And I said, "Yeah, you know, I love Jalaisha to death." I cleared out my closet. I didn't have any of my clothes in the closet. My clothes were in the basket. It was all baby clothes everywhere, like she was really my child. So I was prepared to do that. So we go down to the juvenile court. I fill out all the papers. Just as I'm about to sign my name on the line to take this girl's child, something came over me, and I said, "You know what, I can't do it." And he started jumping up and going off, "What do you mean you can't do it?" And I'm like, you know what, God is telling me not to do this. If it's meant for me to have this baby, he's going to bring her to me, but he's going to do it another way. So we ended up leaving. And he was upset for a little while, but he ended up bringing her back to me because he knew she was safe with me. Well, he ended up getting incarcerated. And I knew at that time that I don't know this girl. I don't know her mom. I don't know anything about her. She doesn't know me. So I'm probably not going to be able to see this child that I've gotten attached to. But I did know where she lived. So I went to her house, introduced myself, and said, "Hey, you know, we're a very close family. We want to continue to be able to see her." Her words to me were, "I don't think that's a good idea." And I asked, "Well, why not?" She said, "Because I don't know y'all, and he would take her and leave, and I don't want to do that. She's my baby. I'm going to keep her." So I left, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I prayed and prayed and prayed. Finally, I said, "I'm giving it to God." I took all of her clothes that I had, and I took them to her mom's house and said, "Here are her clothes. I'll see you later." My thought process was, when her daddy get out, whenever that may be, I'll see her again. Well, what I ended up doing, I left her my phone number. Well, she calls me that weekend. "Hey, I thought about it. It's not right for me to keep her from her family. Do you want to come get her for the weekend?" I left work early. I said, "Yeah, I want to come get her." So before she could change her mind, I clocked out. When I got there, she said, "Oh, but she doesn't have any diapers." "Okay, that's fine. I'll buy her diapers." "Oh, she doesn't have any milk." "That's fine. I'll buy her milk." "Oh, she doesn't have any clothes." "That's fine. What does she need? Let me know. Whatever I got to go through to keep this child with me this weekend, that's what I'm going to go through." So it went from keeping Jalaisha to one time she called me and said, "Well, you know, I'm a young mother." She was 16, 17. She said, "I'm a young mother and I never get to do anything, so can you keep my son this weekend too?" Now, personally, that wasn't my intention. The only thing I knew was, this child, I don't know him, but if I got to keep him to keep Jalaisha, then that's what I'm going to do. So that's how Tyrone came into the picture, and that's how he and I started bonding. Well, on April 15, 2008, I get a phone call from her saying my mom called DCS on me. She told them that I was leaving the kids at home overnight by themselves. And she said she's going to keep Ty, but she's going to put Jalaisha in state custody. Once again, I clocked out from work and said that's not going to happen. We ended up having a meeting with DCS, everybody who was involved in this situation, and it was said that I would take custody of Jalaisha and another family member would take custody of Tyrone. So I was excited. I got my baby. Even if it's just for 30 days, I have her. So I called my mama, Mama, I got Jalaisha. And my mama said, well, what about the little boy? I said, well, I didn't get him. Well, why not? You don't split them up. Now, what I'm thinking is, why not? I've never been through what my mom has been through. They were taken from their mother, but they were kept together. So it was important for her, for Tyrone and Jalaisha to stay together. So, I was scared. I was 24 years old. I don't want to do this. So we went back and forth. She said, well, just see if you can get him. I said, okay, Mom, I'm going to see if I can get him. I hung up that phone with no intentions of calling the DCS worker telling her that I wanted him. That just wasn't going to happen. Well, a couple of hours later, DCS worker calls me. She says, hey, we got a problem. And I'm thinking she's saying, bring Jalaisha back. And I said, well, what's the problem? The family member who was going to take Tyrone is not going to take him. So if you don't take him, we have to put him in foster care. Before I could even think about it, I said, well, bring him on to my house. And that's how we got started with Tyrone living with us. Now, I was scared to death. Just imagine being 24 years old, living your life, single, got your sports car, doing your own little thing. You wake up single, you go to bed, mother of a 6-month-old and an 18-month-old. Tyrone had so many issues due to the trauma that his mom caused him. For about a year and a half to 2 years, he would wake up every single night between 12 a.m. and 2 a.m. screaming. If he saw me, he would go back to sleep. But if he didn't see me, I would have to run in the room and rock him to sleep. So it got to the point where I was pretty much keeping myself up between 12 and 2 because I knew that he was going to be waking up. Let's see here. Now, when he came to us, he was 18 months. He was still mostly drinking from a sippy cup, hardly eating any solid foods. In the first month of living with me, he gained about 7 to 10 pounds. He had extremely aggressive behavior. I'm talking about, at 18 months, he bit 13 kids in 1 week in daycare. And I was just like, I don't know what to do. I'm crying and crying. I'm trying everything. I'm talking to him. I tried biting him back. I'm picking him up from daycare, and parents are looking at me like they want to fight me, and I don't even know why. I'm like, what happened today? And he was climbing up in the cribs while the kids were napping and biting him. I mean, he was just a habitual biter. So we, he was only 18 months, so I didn't really want to whoop him, but they told me that he was going to get expelled if I didn't, if we couldn't do anything about it. So I'll never forget, I went home, I prayed, I said, Lord, forgive me, but I cannot take any more time off from work. Let's just say Tyrone never bit another child. If you asked him to this day that he bite somebody, he starts crying, and that was 6 years ago. Now, another thing about him, he was very protective of his sister, and I learned that he was so protective of her because at least 4 times that we know of, he was left at home with her overnight, locked in a dark room, taking care of her. So he was her protector. He would try to change her diapers. He would try to feed her. If anybody went to grab her, he would just go into a rage. He couldn't talk, and we didn't know why he couldn't talk, but he couldn't talk. All we would know is he would reach out to grab for her, and he would try to hit whoever is grabbing for her. We ended up finding out it was because he was mildly hearing impaired due to excess fluid on his ears. Once we got that fixed, he started talking and ain't shut up since. Now, once the first 30 days went by, I realized that this was not going to be just for 30 days like I was initially promised. It was going to take a little longer. But I was fine through that. In those first 30 days, we went through so much together that I really kind of didn't want to give them back. We learned about different things going on with Ty, from learning disabilities, developmental delays, severe asthma attacks at 2 a.m. in the morning. It's taken 2 and 3 hours to stabilize him in Vanderbilt. As children, me and my sister, we never, ever, ever went through any of that. We never rode in an ambulance. My first time riding in an ambulance was with Tyrone. I was just as scared as he was. The whole time while this was going on, Mom was supposed to be bettering herself in order to get the children back. But instead, she was getting worse. So I guess you can understand my heartache when I learned that the state was giving them back to her. At the time, the children had lived with me for 2.5 years. We had gone through everything together. The state told me that they had to do something with the case, and since it was easier to return the children to her versus trying to terminate her rights, that they'd be going home. Crushed, unappreciated, deceived, hurt, confused, betrayed. These are all the feelings I had toward the situation in the state, because they knew she was not ready. After all, she was pregnant with baby number 4, and she was only about 21, 22. But the day I took the kids, I did make a promise to her. I told her that whenever she was ready for the children, I would return them to her. So, being the moral person that I am, I had to honor that. You know, the kid's attorney tried to get me to fight them going back home, but I said no. I made a promise to her. I'm going to give her her kids back. I knew she wasn't ready though, because she was just mad at me, so that's why she wanted the kids back. If I didn't raise the kids the way that she wanted me to raise them, then she would always threaten to take the children back. One thing I will never, ever, ever, ever forget is the Sunday before the children returned. I sat on that back row, back there with my granny, and I cried and I cried and I cried. I cried so long and so hard that Sister Lusk and Sister Waters came to my aid. Sister Waters said, "What's wrong?" I could barely talk. I could barely get it out what was going on, because a lot of people in here didn't even know that they were not my biological children. They thought I had 4 kids: Jordan, Jay, Ty, and Jalaisha. But I eventually got it out, and I remember Christy saying one specific thing. I thought she was crazy at the time. That's because her walk with God was different than mine. But she said, "You know this is His plan. This time is for you. He's giving you time to get yourself together." And then Sister Waters chimed in and said, "Yeah, you know you need to get yourself together." Sister Waters and I had developed a relationship outside of church, and there were times when I didn't have any food. She lived right around the corner from me. Sister Waters would come and she would cook meals for me. Sometimes I want to act like I'm back at that stage so she can cook me some of those good meals again, but she says she doesn't cook like that anymore. But they really took care of me, and I never will forget them saying, "The kids are going to come back to you." Like Christy was adamant, "The kids are coming back to you. The kids are coming back to you." She's telling me this, and I'm looking at her saying, "No, they're not," and she's looking at me saying, "Yes, they are." Eventually, I just gave in, because she obviously knew something that I didn't know. Now, I went home that evening and I listened to a CD that Jalen, one of the CDs that Jalen used to give us for the sermon for the day. And there was a song, 2 songs in particular, that always, always kept me going, because with everything I went through with the kids, there were times where I just wanted to give up. I wanted to say, "You know what, here, take your kids back. I'll take my life back. We can go on our merry little way. I'll be their godmother, but we'll do that." But Sister LaShonda used to sing a song, "I Just Can't Give Up Now." That song, I would listen to it over and over again. And the lyrics that touched me the most said, "I know you didn't leave me out here to leave me lonely." And that night, that Sunday night when I went home, I listened to that. It probably sung me to sleep because I listened to it so much. Because I felt like, okay, God, you have brought me this far with these kids. I have made tremendous progress with them. Why are you taking them from me? I couldn't see then what I see now. The second song is actually the song that Lanier sung today. And there's something about when he says, "Keep going, going on." there were so many times that all I would listen to was going, going, going. Just keep going on, just keep going on, because I wanted to give up bad. The things that I was put through, I don't talk about it in front of the children, so we'll leave it there, but the things that I was put through was just traumatic, to say the least. Well, that next Tuesday, they ended up going home. I basically lost myself. My heart hurt so bad because I knew they were in a dangerous situation. But the kids had been with me for so long that I felt like the state took my kids from me and gave them to a stranger because she really didn't know them. I went through a depression. I started losing hair. I started gaining even more weight. It was just horrible. But one day I woke up and said, I have got to get my life back. Fortunately, their mom still allowed me to have a relationship with them through the time that they were at home, which was a total of 7 months. But I got myself back together. I was able to find a good job, get my car running. I was back to doing me. As soon as I got back on my feet, I got another phone call. Their mom found out that her husband had beat Tyrone with an extension cord. And instead of leaving her husband, she wanted to send them with me again. Although I was upset about the situation, I was ecstatic that they could come back to me. But this time, I didn't make a promise to give the kids back. This time I said, you know what? They're staying with me. It's only been 7 months and they've been home. They belong with me. They don't belong there. So things progressively got worse between me and their mom because of the danger they were constantly put in. I had to get supervised visitation. I mean, you name it, I went through it. We would go to court and there would be lies told on me. There were lies told to people about me. And the whole time, the only thing I wanted was for us to get along for the sake of the children. So it hurt that these things were done to me. I was treated as though I took the kids from her, but she was the one that called me both times. But every time she would get mad, she would threaten to take the children from me, especially if I took them somewhere she didn't want me to take them. If she's mad at somebody, the kids can't go over there this week, so don't take them over there. If I took them over there, you better believe I was getting a phone call. So I got to the point where I just call her bluff and be like, okay, well, you want them, come get them. And I never hear anything else for some months. Well, eventually I got tired of the threats, the lies, the turmoil, and the disappearances. I filed for petition of parental rights in June of 2012. On November 14th, 2014, everything came to a head. Both parental rights were terminated and I was granted legal custody. But that wasn't good enough for me. I needed the security of knowing that they were mine, and no one, absolutely no one, could change that. On March 17th of 2014, I filed a petition for adoption. The date was set to Tuesday, May 6, 2014. As the day got closer and closer, I became more and more emotional. This past Monday morning, I received a phone call from the attorney. She said, I have some bad news. I said, well, what is the bad news? She says, the election is tomorrow. Okay, yay for them. What is the bad news? They've closed the dockets. What does that have to do with me? Court is closed. So what are you telling me? We don't know when your adoption is going to go through. I cried and I cried. I cried for hours. And a lot of people couldn't understand why I was crying. They're like, well, you have the kids, so what are you crying about? You're going to get the kids, so what are you crying about? It's just a piece of paper. But it's not a piece of paper for me. This is more than a piece of paper. This is security for my children. This is security for us. This is all the hard work that I've been through for the past 6 years. I need this. And I've been through so much over the past 6 years to finally get right there. You can see the finish line and then them tell you, well, hold up, turn around, go back. We don't know when we're going to do the adoption. That killed me. My mama walked in my room and saw me laying on the bed crying. She didn't have not an ounce of sympathy. She said, what you crying for? You got more faith than that? My sister said, Mama, stop it, stop it. Nah, get up. And then she just walked out of the room, didn't say any encouraging words, baby, it's gonna be okay. And as soon as she did it, I thought about my cousin, because she would do the same thing. She didn't even understand. She was like, you know, I wasn't gonna say anything, but I was wondering why you was crying, because y'all ain't been through what I done been through. So anyway, the attorney said that the courts forgot to call her and tell her until Monday. Everybody else who had a court date for May 6th, they were notified 2 weeks ago that their court date was going to be changed. 2 weeks ago would have been better for me because Monday I'm making plans. We got our clothes to go to court. We got everything that we're doing. And then I find this out. So she said, well, you know, I'm really adamant for you. I'm fighting for you. I'm trying to see what can happen. So finally, after about maybe 4 hours, I stopped crying. I said, you know what? I'm going to give it to God. I'm just let God have it. Well, she called me at about 4:13 and said, Aisha, I need you to be at court tomorrow, 9 o'clock on the dot. I said, well, what happened? She said, well, they found another judge that'll do it. He's not an adoption judge, but he's a civil court judge, and he will get your case heard. I said, okay. We were supposed to be there 9 o'clock. I may have got there about 7:30. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't late. I didn't run into any traffic. I didn't want to do anything. But I just, you know, went ahead, got myself together. And today, I stand here not as a safety placement, no longer as a foster parent, no longer as a woman wronged by the system, not as a legal guardian, but I stand before you all today as the proud legal mother of Tyrone Lewis and Jalaisha Barnett. And I have no one to thank for this but the Lord. He got me through this. He used this situation to bring me closer to Him, because prior to this, I was a good little Christian. I had faith in God. I did everything God's way. But once He put me in this situation, I realized I had no faith before the kids. I thought that I did. I thought that I had a relationship with God, but I would lean on God, then my mama, then my sister. Anybody who was around me, I would lean on them. But going through this situation, there were some things that people just could not help me with. Nobody could help me with it but God. So this brought me closer to Him in that aspect. And then also it has taught me to do the same thing for my children. I teach them, Mama may not see you do something, but God's going to see you do it. And so we play this little, well, it's not a game, but I tell them, whenever you want to do something bad, you got the devil on this shoulder and you got God on this shoulder. If you do something bad, you give the devil the point. You do something good, you give God the point. So who do you want to have all the points? And of course they say God. That doesn't mean they don't give the devil points sometimes, but they know. And I've actually heard Tyrone telling somebody, well, you can't let the devil win, you got to let God win. And I'm like, well, you take your own advice in school? But this whole situation with the kids, it made me a stronger person. I didn't even realize the strength that I had until I had to go through some of the things that I went through with the kids. My advice to young mothers, whether you're going through my exact situation or not, is to never, ever, ever, ever give up. Always keep God first. You cannot do it without Him. Many have tried, and you see where their kids are. And like the scripture says, train up a child in the way that he will go, and when he gets older, he will not depart. That is true. And I remember a specific thing that Pastor Coleman said one Sunday. They may leave or stray, but they'll never depart, because they're always going to come back. And that's why when Tyrone and Jalaisha spend the night over somebody's house, I try my best to get them back home by Sunday morning so that they can go to church. They know as soon as Wednesday hits and they get out of school, we got church today? Yep. We got church today? Yep. They know what days we go to church. Tyrone woke up at about 7 o'clock this morning. Mama, are we late for church? No, baby, we're not late. And I want to keep instilling that in them so that when they get older, when they go to college, they can do what I did. When I went to college, I found me a church home in Kentucky. As soon as I got my car at 16 years old, first place I went was to church. And it's because I was brought up like that. In closing, I must say this. When the children were sent back home to their birth mom, I made a promise to God. I said, God, if you give them back to me, I will give them back to you. They are mine now, and I will hold true to my promise. With that being said, Pastor Coleman, I would like to offer my children as candidates for baptism. Thank you all.